Hello, hello, welcome back to Supposedly Fun. So I did most of my 2019 wrap up in terms of most favorite books, some also favorite books, and my least favorite books. I'll link those videos down below. So today I wanted to get to goals, new goals for 2020, and a bit of a wrap up on my goals for 2019. And I feel like the way to do this that makes sense the most is to start with the wrap up for 2019 and how I did on that. I ran out and got myself a journal to help me show you how I did on my goals. The inspiration for this kind of came from Doris at Aldi Books and her bullet journal. I just felt like that was a really good, I'm not going to do a bullet journal at all, probably never. But I did think that some of the ways she did the journaling looked like good ways of getting that visual representation across, rather than just having me tell you numbers or try to like create a graph in Excel or any of that stuff. So I had two goals for 2019. The first one was that I looked back over previous years and realized my reading in terms of the gender of the author was pretty even, but I always ended up reading more male authors than female authors. So I figured, pretty easy goal, just read more books by women than by men. So the criteria for this goal actually did have something of a number to hit. I just had to read more than 50% books by female authors. So here is how I did on that one. So again, goal, read more books by women than by men. So in 2018, for comparison, I read 26 out of the 58 books that I read were by women. That's 45%. That's roughly how my reading looked before that. In 2019, I read 90 books total. 59 of them were by women, 30 by men. Crushed it. Did really well on this goal this year. There were actually, I believe, at least 2 months where I read nothing but books by women. And that was great. And you can see that here because I created this handy little chart. This is one of the things that Doris helped inspire. So each square is for a book, one of the 90 books. They're white at the end because I didn't finish that line. I thought about getting away from the classic pink and blue to represent genders, but I figured this, it is what it is. This is the easiest way that people will immediately understand to kind of look at the map. So you can see in the beginning, it was a while. It was March before I read a book by a man, and we have one green spot on the chart because I read one book that was by someone who identifies as gender non-binary, so I don't want to try to lump them into one of the other categories. So we have one outlier in there. Not bad. Did really well on that. Like I said, it was always close, so I knew that was an achievable goal, but I'm really pleased that it went that well. 66% is pretty good. My other goal for the year related to LGBTQ books. So I, as a gay man, I read books that have gay characters, but I don't branch into the other letters of the LGBTQ spectrum very much. So my goal was to read more books by or about lesbian, bisexual, or transgender or questioning characters and authors, and not just focus on books by or about straight people or books by or about gay men. So for context, in 2018, I read 0 books by or about lesbians, 9 by or about gay men, 0 that had bisexual representation, 2 books that had transgender representation, and 0 for questioning. I read 47 books by or about straight people. So of all the 58 books that I read in 2018, only 2 would have counted for this goal. That's 3.4% of my reading in 2018. How did I do in 2019? I read 7 books that qualified for, either had lesbian characters or were written by lesbians, 13 that had gay representation or authors. I had thought bisexual was the one I was struggling with the most, but actually I managed to get 7. It tied with lesbian, and it features pretty well in this little chart. So not too bad on that. And 4 books that had transgender representation, 0 on questioning. So questioning is actually the one that's probably the hardest. If you have recommendations for anything that would hit that box, let me know. I feel like any of the books that I read that had questioning were really just about a person struggling to come out as either gay or lesbian or transgender. which is not what questioning is supposed to stand for. So, it gets resolved. But so that is a total of 18 books that are lesbian, bisexual, transgender, questioning related, compared to 59 books representing straight people. Out of 90, that means 20% of my 2019 reading hit the goal, and you can see a bit of a breakout. Yellow represents heterosexual books or authors. And the tricky thing is nonfiction, if it doesn't have a gay element, I count it for that. So, it's the dominant force still. But interesting, because like I said, I thought bisexual was going to be the one that was the biggest challenge, but it's out there, orange. In fact, I had originally labeled this square as yellow, and I had to change it to orange because it occurred to me after the fact that there was a person in that book who was bisexual. So there you go. So that is how I did on my 2019 goals. Let's talk about 2020. Now, I had considered for my 2020 goals giving you a chart like this that gives a breakout of how I did on what I want to achieve. But it's a little difficult for at least one of them, and it would have been, let's be real, it also would have been a lot of work, and I didn't feel like doing that. So I'm just going to present to you what my 2020 goals are. And both of them, I'm doing two again, follow a theme. And the theme I'm going with for 2020, this is the first time I've done a theme, and I'm kind of excited. So my theme for 2020 is read outside your comfort zone. And I'm really excited about this. So I came up with two goals that fit my theme of read outside your comfort zone, and one that kind of ties in, but it's not really a goal. It's just kind of to go with the theme more than anything. So the first goal is to read books by authors from outside North America and Europe. The vast majority of authors that I read are either from the United States or Canada or somewhere in Europe. So I want to get outside of those zones. And it's not that I never read books from anyone outside those areas, but kind of like how I wanted to push representation in my of other areas in my 2019 goals, I want to do that this year. I want to get outside those areas. I would definitely want to read at least one book from each continent, other than Antarctica, of course. And that is definitely achievable. I want to read more authors that come from or set their books in different areas. In particular, I think Africa would be an interesting one to explore. Asia. I know there are a lot of people who represent Australian literature on BookTube, and I'm really looking forward to that. But also South American literature. And I brought one book to show that kind of ties back to this goal, which is Isabel Allende's The House of the Spirits. This is something that's been on my TBR for a really long time. Isabel Allende was born in South America, born in Peru and raised in Chile. So, and I believe this book is very much about politics in South America. So this would definitely qualify, and it's something that I've been wanting to read for a really long time. So this kind of gives me an excuse to pick up some books like this. I've gotten a list of recommendations from authors who represent Asia. If you have some recommendations for maybe Africa, I'm already perusing some of the Australian recommendations, but if you have some of those as well, I would love to hear them. So my first goal thinks of my comfort zone in terms of the geographical location of the authors and where the books are set, North America and Europe. The second goal is more about the content of the books that I read, and I want to explore some genres that I don't usually read, maybe some books that I don't usually read. And I had originally thought about, including some quote-unquote difficult books in this, but that's where the addenda is going to come in, because it feels hard to qualify those in a genre. So I want to read more books that are in genres that I don't typically read. The example I brought out is something from my book haul from December. It's The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin. I don't really read sci-fi or fantasy, so I feel like Ursula K. Le Guin is a natural fit for that genre that could challenge my comfort zone and be kind of quality reading. I've heard really good things about her. I did read an Ursula K. Le Guin book back when I was in high school. I don't remember it very well, so she'll almost be entirely new to me. She might as well be, I guess. So that is something that will qualify. I had also had it in my head that I'm just going to read a straight genre romance and see how that goes. But Brian at Bookish totally stole my thunder and already did that, so come on, dude. actually, it's really interesting. I will link his video where he talks about that down below. I will probably still do it. So that covers sci-fi and romance. I may read a couple more like children's books, things like that. I am also really going to try to get into a little bit of poetry. I am traditionally terrified of poetry because I feel really insecure that I don't understand it. So I want to challenge myself to do some poetry books as well. I'm including that as a genre like sci-fi. So that's that goal, and the addenda is where, because as I said, it's kind of hard to say include like difficult books in terms of like a genre, because what is a difficult book? So I'm also going to keep with the theme in addition to the goals of just reading outside my comfort zone and challenge myself to read some things I ordinarily would say I don't want to read, or that I would not kind of consider. And the example that comes to me the most is like Thomas Pynchon's Gravity's Rainbow. That is something that it's on my Pulitzer Prize project as a kind of addenda, because it was the book that the jury recommended for the Pulitzer Prize the year it was published. But rather than give an award to a book that they thought was obscene and confusing, they just didn't give an award that year. So this may be the year I read that book. And just kind of keeping track of things like that. I would love the audacity of just saying, I'm going to read Don Quixote this year, or Moby Dick, something like that. So a big, massive book that I've kind of thought about reading in the past, maybe The Tale of Genji. But I'm not going to push myself in terms of that. If it happens, it happens. But I'm just going to try to think differently about books. And that's where the theme comes in. And it's not really a goal. It's just I'm going to think about reading books that I might otherwise not give a chance, if that makes sense. And if it's a little nebulous, it's deliberately structured that way because I feel like I need a little bit of flexibility. I need a little bit of leeway. For me, the goals are about challenging myself and not really setting myself up to fail. And not that that's what I'm doing if I assign numbers to things, or like say I have to read 50 books about this. But it also kind of stresses me out a little bit. So I need a little bit of leeway. And plus there are books that are going to come out this year that I'm going to want to read anyway. So just because, say, Hilary Mantel's book, the final Thomas Cromwell book, The Mirror and the Light, just because it's by an author from Europe and it's not necessarily a genre book, I still want to read it. So I don't want to neglect things I would otherwise read just to hit these goals. So that's kind of where I'm coming from in terms of that. And it's nebulous, not because I'm giving myself leeway to kind of fudge the numbers, but because I want a little bit of give in what I do. And I hope that makes sense. So those are my goals and my theme for 2020. I'm really excited about it. I think it's going to be a good year for reading, and I'm finally getting caught up on my YouTube video watching. I had fallen behind in December. Vlogmas was terrible for that, so I'm finally getting caught up, and that feels good. And I'm really looking forward to the year. I took a little bit of a reading break in the first half of January, and I've gotten started again. I'm reading 2 books at once. One of them is a buddy read with a commenter, Amelia, and it's been going great so far. It's Toni Morrison. We're reading Song of Solomon, and it is wonderful. It's beautiful. So she doesn't necessarily hit any of my reading goals, but it's a great way to kick off the year. And I'm really looking forward to exploring some of these goals and getting to them. If you have recommendations, I'd love to hear them. If you want to tell me what your goals are for 2020, feel free to drop that down below. As always, if you've made it to this point of the video, I really appreciate it. I appreciate your time. And if you want to leave a comment, I would appreciate that as well. And I will be back. I'm really looking forward to 2020. Let's do this. Until next time, happy reading.